All right. Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're calling in from. My name is Sheldon. I'm a marketing manager here at Guava. Today we're going to have a webinar, Archiving Social Media in the Workplace. I'm here with Q Mangus. He's the Director of Product Marketing here at Guava. And we're going to have a Q&A session addressing the most frequent questions we get at events or through email and other things about archiving social media, best practices, and then our solution Retain. I'll be fielding some of the questions, and Q will be answering them. We have a number of questions we get a lot that we want to go over. However, the questions that you have are obviously the most important ones. So please put those in the chat or Q&A section, and we will be sure to address those. And to do that, you can just click on the chat or QA icons. You can type those in. Q, you want to introduce yourself?
Welcome, everyone. Happy to be here and to present this information to you about archiving social media in the workplace. I hope everyone can participate and add the questions, and I'll be happy to field them.
Awesome. Well, let's just jump right in then, and let's get started. First question, we get this all the time. First off, should I allow my users access to social media and instant messaging at work?
Yeah, that's a big question. I know that a lot of people, a lot of organizations have taken the approach to just say, you know what, we're going to just not allow social media at work. We're going to not allow our employees to access social media at work and instant messaging. However, really, I'm going to show some stuff here in just a second, but really the answer, the good answer is that you should allow users to access social media at work and instant messaging, but you should have controls over them. The idea is that if you allow your employees to access social media on your network, but you have the ability to have oversight on what they're doing, that's going to be better. And the reason why I say that is because social media continues to grow. So I'm going to show a few slides here that just, we all know this, right? But, leading up to this year, this was a recent survey done by the Radicati Group showing that leading up to this year, social media accounts and users just continue to grow, right? There's just tons and tons of people using social media. And once again, this was leading up to this year that the amount of minutes per day that people would be using enterprise and consumer social media continues to grow as well. And once again, one more stat that I wanted to show you here is that social media account growth will continue to outpace other types of collaboration. So social media accounts are here to stay. Your employees are accessing them. And it's similar when it comes to instant messaging. It's just going to continue to grow. So the point is, and the reason why I bring up these stats and these slides is to let you know that your employees are going to access social media at work whether you allow them to or not. They have ways of getting around what you have in place. So if you have things that block them from the network, keep them from accessing social media, that doesn't matter because they have a device, right? They probably have a phone that they're bringing or something else that allows them to access that. And so the idea is that if you don't allow them to use it on your network, they're going to find another way to do it. But with that being said, you need to have some sort of oversight as well. You can't just allow unfettered access because that's going to cause problems as well. So the short answer is yes, you should allow users to access social media and instant messaging at work. And the long answer is yes, but with oversight. Hey, I just realized that answer is actually a little shorter than my first one, but the idea is the reason behind it. Also, social media and instant messaging actually improves productivity. Your employees can communicate with your customers and find ways to, get your brand out there more, talk about your corporation, get a sense for what the marketplace feels on that. So there is a lot of good reasons to allow your employees to access social media, and you should, but you need to have that oversight.
Awesome, great. Had a little technical difficulty here. Kicked me out for a second there. Well, that leads perfectly to our next question. So why do I need to archive social media at work? If I'm going to allow access, and obviously we should, right? What do I need to do? Why do I need to archive it?
So that's exactly kind of what I was talking about. There's a couple of reasons why. So let me skip here. So let's talk first kind of about what I was already saying. So your employees are going to access social media at work, whether you allow them or not. So allow them and then have that oversight. And archiving is one of the ways in which you can have oversight of social media and instant messaging communication. Is you can take everything that they've been saying on social media and put it into an archive that you can now go back and see what has happened. So that's one reason why you should archive, is to have that oversight. The other reason is that for organizations, it's actually required, and depending on the type of organization you're in, it can have more weight than others. So if you're in a healthcare organization, you have HIPAA and high-tech. For financial, you have FINRA and SEC regulations, the Dodd-Frank Act. There is a lot of regulations out there, depending on the type of organization that you're in, that actually mandates that you archive social media, that you have access to that kind of social media. So if your employees are communicating with that, you need to be able to have access to it. And so that means that you need to archive. And then, of course, the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure also state that you need to be archiving social media. In fact, recently in December 2015, the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure were updated so that now social media has just as much evidentiary and discovery weight as other electronically stored information like email. So the idea is that email and social media, when it comes to the courts, is viewed the same way. And so what does that mean? Let's think about that for a minute. You need to have your social media archived. If you have it and you can prove what has gone on, you're better off in a court. However, if you don't have it and the other side does, what does that mean? Right? You don't have that evidence. So the idea is that, especially with this recent change with the FRCP, and everybody's subject to that, right, is that you need to have that. So that's one side of it, is that you're kind of mandated to do it. But of course, the other side is that you should just be doing it to have that oversight. You should do it because you want to be able to know what's going on in your organization. You want to know what your employees are talking about, and you want to be able to have that oversight as people access social media. The next question is, can we monitor and archive something as personal as social media? Interestingly enough, this one comes up a lot, and there's something that you really have to think about when it comes to social media, and that is, and this actually applies to any kind of electronic communication, is that your employees, when they're at work, need to realize that that you need to have oversight of what they're saying, what they're pushing when it comes to email, when it comes to social media, when it comes to mobile. And so the idea is, or with the question of, can we monitor and archive something as personal as social media? The answer is yes. But the way you need to do this, especially legally, is you need to have a policy. And so I would suggest to everyone on this call that you need an electronic communication policy that states this is what you can and cannot do on social media. This is what you can and cannot do on email. This is what you can and cannot do on your mobile device. So you need a policy that clearly outlines what is going on, it clearly outlines what people can and cannot do. And this policy needs to state that those kind of communications will be monitored and archived to be able to have oversight on what has been said and done. So the answer is yes, you can monitor and archive, but you need that policy. So once you have that policy, you need to make sure everybody understands it and they're trained on it, and then it's updated regularly, and then you need a solution that will support that policy. And interestingly enough, I had this slide here that I just wanted to show. Most people aren't doing this right now. Most people aren't archiving social media and instant messaging. almost everybody's archiving email. As we stated before, it has the same weight now in the courts, so we should be doing this. And so, once again, this kind of wraps everything together that you need to be monitoring and archiving social media, even if it's personal social media, just to have that oversight. Okay, so then the next one is what about corporate social media accounts? This is a big one. So this one's big because we all know that most companies now have some sort of corporate social media account, right? You probably have a Facebook page for your company. You probably have a Twitter. I would imagine you have a LinkedIn account. The idea is you need to be able to have oversight on that as well. So there's a couple of things you need to think about when it comes to corporate social media. Number one, who is accessing your corporate social media? Who has access to it? And then number two, who is posting to your corporate social media account? What's being posted to those accounts? And is it in line with your brand, with what you want, with what your employees are asking? So you need to be thinking about that. Who has access to your corporate social media account? What are they posting? Two, what are people posting to your social media account? What is being said about your corporation? And so it's important for you to be able to go out and see what is going on. And this brings us back to an archiving solution, and we'll talk about the archiving solution that we offer here at Guava. But the idea is that with a good archiving solution, you can go out and pull in all the corporate social media account data and have that in an archive that you can go back and see what has happened historically and be able to, if you have the right tool, monitor what is being said on your corporate social media accounts and be able to have oversight on that.
Okay, well that leads to the next question is, what type of social media should an organization be archiving?
So really, that's a great one. What type of social media should an organization be archiving? It all depends on really what your organization is using, right? Obviously the big players, and I still have this on the screen here, the big players are Facebook and Twitter. Those are two that are used quite often. And then obviously LinkedIn's a big one. There's Yammer, that's a Microsoft product that's more of a internal social media. That's probably something you should be archiving. There's others as well that would be good to archive, but when it comes down to it, really the idea is whatever your company is using for social media, you should be archiving. And then the same goes for instant messaging. You know, if you're using Google Hangouts or Yahoo IM, AOL IM, or Skype for Business, those are things that you should probably look into archiving as well. So those are just a few. I know there's more out there, but those are a few that we suggest and actually that Retain itself archives. But really the idea is that you should be archiving those types of social media, mainly what your company is using. And then you want to make sure that you're archiving the right things, right? You want to be able to make sure that you want to be able to archive wall posts, status updates, messages, tweets, updates on LinkedIn, company updates, your maybe even profile changes when it comes to your employees. That's a big one too. So those are all things that you should be archiving when it comes to social media. And then with instant messaging, obviously you should be archiving the chats, group chats. Those are all what you should be archiving.
Great. So we've kind of touched the what and why, what we should, an organization should be archiving when it comes to social media and instant messaging, and then why, because of the regulations and protection and you didn't go into this much for litigation and other things, you know, even going so far as preserving corporate identity and information. And anyway, this leads to our next question is how, right? How does social media archiving work with Retain specific?
Great. So that is, yeah. So the rest of the time, I think, from what I can see, unless there's other questions that come through on the chat, is going to be kind of dedicated to the solution that we offer, and that's Retain. So when it comes to Retain Social, that's the product. So there's an overall product. Let me go back up one. There's an overall product called Retain. And what Retain does is it archives multi-platform email, as you can see here, social media, web searches, and mobile communication. So that's the solution as a whole. All those communications are archived into one central archive, and that archive can be searched. You can perform e-discovery on that archive. You can publish the information. You can redact. You can restore to the live inbox. So Retain is that unified archiving solution, meaning that we take all these kinds of communications and we archive them into one central archive. Now, a piece of Retain that I'd like to touch on to answer the question here is Retain Social. Retain Social is more than just archiving. It actually is a monitoring and filtering piece. So what Retain Social does is it sits on the network, and it has what we call the Retain Social Media Proxy, compliance proxy. So it talks and communicates with the firewall, and so as messages are coming in or going out of the network in the corporation, that traffic is intercepted at the firewall and diverted through the compliance proxy. And in that proxy, there is things that you can do and set up. There's policies that you can set up to monitor and filter what is being posted. So if you have certain keywords that you don't want people to post, or things that you don't want them to say, or information that's sensitive or illicit information or inappropriate communication, that can all be blocked. And that goes for the types of platforms that you see here: Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Yammer, along with instant messaging of AOL, Yahoo, Link/Skype for Business, and Google Hangouts. All of those, and then web searches as well for Wikipedia, Yahoo, Bing, Google, and YouTube. So the searches that they do are all monitored. You can create those policies and those rules to filter and block, and then they're archived as well. So that's the great thing. And let me show you one thing here. So when a message, for example, here on Facebook, if I try to post something that blocks policy, in this case I'm using a keyword. I'm using the keyword of guava. If I try and post that, it's going to bring up a dialog box that actually looks like it's coming from, in this case, Facebook, and it'd be similar for Twitter and LinkedIn and Yammer, and also for instant messaging. And it's coming up and saying that this can't be posted due to policy violation. That message can be customized depending on your needs, but that's the nice thing, is that now you have the ability to block things from being posted. You can filter that social media, and then of course that message is archived as well in Retain. Let me go back to a couple of other things that Retain Social has to kind of touch on what we were talking about. When a policy violating post is put out there, an administrator is notified of that, so you can have that oversight. Also, Retain Social works off the network. If you want to be able to monitor and archive people who are off your network, and the way that works is with an agent. It's an agent that can go on a Windows or a Mac OS machine, and that agent will then monitor and will act as that same compliance proxy, but it's on that machine itself, and will monitor and filter, and then it pushes that to the archive. And then finally, I know I talked a lot about corporate social media, and so with Retain, one, you can archive all your corporate social media. So this works for people's personal social media as they're accessing it at work. It will pull it down. So when they access their Facebook page or their Twitter feed, it's going to pull it into Retain, and it will monitor it. And then for corporate social media, it will pull all your corporate social media down as long as somebody accesses it on the network. They have to do that. So once somebody accesses your corporate social media account, it's going to all pull down, and that will be archived, which is a huge thing, I know, for a lot of organizations. And furthermore, I talked a lot about how you need to be able to have oversight over who accesses your corporate social media. And so Retain actually features a corporate social media access portal. So you can go in there and you can grant rights to individuals in your company to access the corporate social media account without ever giving them the details on what the password is. So they can go in and you grant them credentials, and then as long as they're on the network, they go to the social media account and it logs them in automatically. So now if you have employees, if you have turnover, you have employees that are coming and going, you don't have to worry about changing all your passwords, revoking rights, and bringing rights back in. You can just grant them. And let me show you a screen grab of that really quick here. So here's an example of the social media accounts. Sorry, I guess it's a little small. But you can see like Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. It has the username and the description there. You can create those policies to now allow different people to access those accounts. And like I said, that now gives you the ability to have your users access it without actually giving them the password and having to manage that all the time. A couple other things that I want to show really quick to answer this question. Here's some of the policies that you can create. Sorry, once again, it is a little small, but you have different categories like adult, aggressive, automotive, business. You can create categories. You can create a custom category. You can actually, monitor and filter the content based on those kind of categories. And also, as part of Retain Social, there is a URL filtering piece, and that's actually what it's showing here. So you can actually filter what your employees are accessing based on URLs and their categories as well. Here is some rules you can set up within Retain to be able to create rules for that content scanning, to be able to block or filter what employees are posting depending on the rules that you create. And then here's just an example of you can set it for the different types of platforms. So if you want to be able to filter and monitor all Facebook and Twitter feeds, but you don't want to monitor your instant messaging, you can do that. You can set it up differently. And you can see some of the criteria here. There's text searching, pattern matching, there's industry standards for patterns. There's a lot of ways that you can monitor and set up the monitoring and filtering in Retain Social. And then here's a view of what it looks like when it's archived, once it's archived into Retain. So you can see that in this particular one, it's a Twitter feed, but you can see that the Facebook posts are archived, Twitter posts, LinkedIn, Yammer, it's all archived. So this particular user is going to see all of their social media and instant messaging from the browse. If you were to do a search, which is next here, it would bring back all results. So in this particular search, I'm looking at all the Facebook status updates, Facebook messages, Twitter feed, YouTube search, and then we even threw in some mobile messaging here on this one. But the idea here is that all these communications are accessible, and a user can browse and view their own personal mailbox and or their own personal social media accounts, and an administrator can view everyone's. And then an administrator or other named user can search the entire archive and bring back those results. It doesn't matter what the platform is, it comes back into one central archive. And then here's a view of the search as well. And this search brings back instantaneous results. We like to call it kind of like a Google-like search, but once again, since we were talking about search, here's how that search works. As I type it in, it gives me suggestions, and then it's highlighted in the results as well. It's highlighted based on the subject, the sender, the recipient, the date, even the attachment, and the content of the attachment is all highlighted in there. So, and that applies to what is suggested and what's highlighted. So yeah, I think I gave a lot of information there. One other thing that I did want to show is that Retain Social does feature intelligent threading. So what that means is that messages are archived in context. So as a conversation happens, now this particular one that I'm showing here is a Skype for business messages. As this is between two people, but if there was a third person in here, that would show up as well. But it's shown in context and in order. So as I'm communicating with one employee and they're coming back to me, it's going to show up in that order. And this is similar, and it works the same way for social media. So let's say that there's Facebook messaging that's going across. It's going to archive it in context, so you can see the entire message string. which is important to view. If I were just to see one of these messages and it wasn't in context, we wouldn't quite know what may be going on. But you can actually view these messages in context and as I said, intelligently threaded. But that's how Retain Social works. Like I said, you can have that oversight, and I'll just throw this diagram up so you can look. I know it's somewhat complicated, but that's kind of the idea behind Retain Social, is you have the ability to monitor, filter, and block postings depending on the policies that you create, and then it also archives them in Retain, and that central archive can be searched. You can apply the litigation holds. You can do redaction, reporting, do e-discovery, and be ready in case of litigation, and then also just be able to see what the status of your organization is.
Great, thank you. Just as a reminder, you can always find out more information on our website, just www.guava.com. Under the Products and Services and Unified Archiving, we have a lot of literature on social media, so you can really drill in on instant messaging or web searches or archiving Yammer, Link, or other social media. There's white papers. So if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to Q or I. But please, our website has a lot of content to really drill down in onto. I think you covered several questions there, Q. One common we get is, how does Retain help with e-discovery? You went into legal searches and holds and a lot there. Let's see, what's some of the other common ones? So I guess in a nutshell, we get this a lot. How does Retain different from other archiving solutions then?
So yeah, perfect. How is Retain different? That's the big play that we have is when it comes to the unified archive. So let's go back to that slide here. There's two big things that we'd like to talk about. Number one is that unified archive. Retain archives multi-platform email. It archives that mobile communication for iOS, Android, and BlackBerry. And then it also does the social media and instant messaging and web search. And it's all in one central archive. Many other archiving solutions will have a separate solution for each one of these types of communication, where Retain has it in that one central archive. Plus, the monitoring and filtering is unique to Retain. And finally, well, actually, a couple other things too that is big for Retain, and that is that search tool that I showed. That's we put a lot of time and effort and got a lot of feedback from our customers to get this. But this Google-like search, where it gives you suggestions of what's in the archive, highlights the field, and actually searches all the files, both the file name and the content of the file, if it's like a Word doc or a PDF. That's unique to Retain as well, and the fact that it brings in the results into one central location. So you do one search from one screen, and it's going to bring back all your messages into that one place. And then one other thing that's big is, I guess it's kind of blocked on that graph. Let me see if I have it on. Okay. One other thing too with Retain is that that makes it different is that it has those built-in e-discovery tools. Many archiving solutions want to have an add-on to do e-discovery or have a separate solution to do e-discovery. But with Retain, there are tools in there to be able to export to PDF or PST, to be able to place a litigation hold on boxes, to be able to mark messages as confidential, to be able to place message tags on messaging, and then to be able as well to perform redaction and strikeout. That's all built into Retain. And plus, there's even a way to export a subset of the archive into what we call the publisher or the standalone archive viewer. And this is a fully indexed standalone archive, and you can hand that off on a portable media, say like a DVD or a jump drive, and hand that off to an external team that you may not want to access your full archive. They can view that subset and they can perform functions there from that exported set of archived items, which is also very unique to have all that into that one archive. So that is really what makes Retain different.
Awesome, thank you. Winding down here, so for those who aren't familiar with Retain on this webinar, is there anything new coming out?
So the big thing that's new, so recently Retain 4 just released. That's the latest release of Retain. And the big thing is there was a UI change. So if you're familiar with Retain, you'll notice that the UI does look different, just cleaner, easier to use. And then that search that I was talking about, that is a new feature with Retain. So those are the latest things that are in Retain. And one other thing, this is kind of outside the realm of what we were talking about with social media, but the question was asked if you're familiar with it. There is mobile voice recording, call recording that's coming here soon. So if that's something you're interested in, just be aware that that will be coming soon.
Great. Always more things coming down the pipeline. Well, let's get to the million-dollar question here. What does Retain cost, and is that cost, how is that? Is it worth it really?
Yeah, that is asked all the time, right? What's the cost of Retain? Retain is priced by user, so every user that you'd want to archive with Retain Social, it's going to be priced by each person that needs to be archived. There's a base system that is the Retain server, and then the social media piece is added onto that. And so the pricing differs depending on your organization type and then the number of seats that you have. There's tiers, and so I can't give exact pricing on this call, but if you do want a quote, please feel free to let us know. You can put that right now in the chat or the Q&A if you want to get a specific price quote for your company, or if you would like to do that later on, feel free to go to guava.com, and there's a place there you can request a quote. But yes, there is a cost, obviously, to Retain, but the cost is worth it because you're prepared, right? You can see what's going on in your organization. You can allow your employees to access social media, but have that oversight, and you'll comply with regulations. And in case of litigation, you'll be prepared for that. So think of it like as insurance, right? You have this money that you put forth now, but it's going to pay off in the long run. Because you will be able to be prepared for litigation, you'll be able to have oversight of communication.
Right, and if you're interested, we actually had a report you can download from our website, actually from Infotech themselves, an analyst from Gartner, and they named us as the best value. So it's always interesting to get some third-party information, some non-biased, I guess, objective analysis there. Let's see if there's any more questions that I missed.
It looks like there was one that came through on the Q&A. Might have come just to me. The question is the archive cloud-based or local, NAS or SAN attached storage? And then typically what volumes of data is expected? Great question. The archive is either. You can do one or the other. For the archive, you can we do have an offering right now, which is a private cloud that we host in our data centers, and coming soon. So once again, we will have the ability to have multi-tenancy, so you can have a public. It can be in a public cloud as well. So depending on what you need, obviously a lot of the organizations prefer that private cloud because of security. And then also, it can be something that is local, that is on-prem. So what you would do is there's the Retain server. You would implement the software. You'd have a server that has the Retain system on there. You'd have a SQL server for metadata, and then you'd partition the hard drive of that server to be able to archive. So the archive would be in that partitioned server, and then there's also an indexing engine to be able to index all that data that's put in there. So once again, the Retain system has the SQL database for metadata, and then a partitioned hard drive for the actual archive itself. And with that indexing engine to be able to quickly and easily search and be able to access that data that's archived. And then the data volumes, it all depends. That's a good question. It all depends on the size of your organization, how many people are accessing social media, how many employees you have. So that's something we could look at. If you would like, we can schedule something with you to look and see how it's going to best work for your organization. But yeah, that all depends on the size of your organization and how much information you're doing. One thing to just be aware of is that when the information is archived, it is compressed, so the storage footprint is smaller. And then on the email side in particular, there's single instance storage. So if you have multiple email messages out to multiple people, it's archived once, and then it points to that. So that's how it works. Once again, there's cloud or on-prem, and then, yeah, that's the archiving system. So great question. Thank you.
Great. Good catch. Thanks. Well, I think that's it. Just in conclusion, I want to thank everyone for participating today. And as a reminder, the webinar, there will be an email with the link to this webinar recording going out to you. So look for that email. Again, I encourage you to visit our YouTube page for other webinars. That's youtube.com/GWAVA-TV, GWAVA-TV. And also check out our website. As I said before, there's a lot of white papers, a lot of information. You can request a quote there, all sorts of stuff. So thank you again for attending, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.